Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe love can survive betrayal, secrets, and time, subscribe now, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. The rain started before sunrise, not the soft kind that taps gently against windows. This was the heavy, relentless kind that flooded narrow streets, soaked coats within seconds, and made the city feel colder than it already was. Clara Vale stood beneath the leaking roof outside St. Rowan's clinic, clutching the sleeve of her sweater with trembling fingers while trying to keep her little boy asleep against her shoulder. Elias was only 4 years old, too young to understand why his mother checked over her shoulder every few minutes. Too young to know she spent every waking day terrified someone would recognize his eyes, because they were not ordinary eyes. They were the exact same deep gray eyes that belonged to Duke Adrien Laurent, the most powerful man in Belmere, and the man Clara disappeared from 5 years earlier. Inside the clinic, nurses rushed past carrying folders and medicine trays while exhausted mothers sat silently beside coughing children. The economic collapse from the previous winter had left half the city struggling. Families lost homes. Jobs vanished overnight. Food lines stretched around churches every morning. People online called it the year everyone broke at once. Clara knew the phrase well because she had lived it. 3 jobs, no family, no support, and one secret that could destroy everything. Miss Vale, the receptionist, called. Clara quickly stepped forward. The older woman adjusted her glasses while reading the chart. "Your son's fever has gotten worse. He needs antibiotics immediately." Clara swallowed hard. "How much?" The receptionist hesitated. 240. The number hit like a punch. Clara already knew she didn't have enough. Not even close. Her cleaning shifts had been reduced again the previous week after the hotel cut staff. She forced herself to smile. "Can you hold the prescription until Friday?" The receptionist looked sympathetic. "Miss Vale, he shouldn't wait that long." Elias stirred weakly against her shoulder. "Mama?" Clara kissed his forehead. "I know, baby." Her chest tightened. There was a time she never worried about money. A time she wore silk dresses instead of thrift store sweaters. A time she stood in candlelit ballrooms while orchestras played beneath golden ceilings. A time before she fell in love with Adrien. Back then, people called them impossible. Not because they lacked chemistry. Everyone saw it. It was obvious from the way his voice softened around her, from the way he searched every room until he found her, from the way she forgot to breathe whenever he touched her hand. No, they were impossible because Belmere's elite never accepted girls like Clara. She wasn't born into power. Her father repaired watches in a tiny shop near the harbor. Her mother died before Clara turned 16. And when Clara entered Laurent Manor as a seasonal event assistant, the aristocrats looked at her the same way wealthy people often look at workers they believe should remain invisible. But Adrien saw her, really saw her. That was the problem. Clara still remembered the first night he spoke to her. The annual winter gala. Snow falling beyond the glass walls. Music echoing through the ballroom. She had been carrying champagne trays when one guest grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises. "You spilled on my wife's dress," the man snapped. "It was an accident," Clara whispered. "You servants are always accidents." Before she could respond, another voice cut through the room. "Take your hand off her." Silence followed instantly. Adrien Laurent rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. The entire room froze as he walked across the ballroom toward them, tall, composed, sharp black coat dusted with snowflakes, and those unmistakable gray eyes locked directly onto Clara. The guest released her wrist immediately. "Your Grace, you will apologize," Adrien said calmly. The man obeyed, not because he wanted to, because men like Adrien controlled industries, banks, political donations, and half the city's economy. Power spoke differently when it wore a tailored suit. Afterward, Clara tried avoiding him. That lasted less than a week. He found reasons to speak with her constantly. At first it was harmless. Questions about event schedules. Then coffee in the library. Then long conversations after midnight when the manor finally became quiet. He listened when she spoke. That alone felt dangerous. Most wealthy men listened only long enough to interrupt. But Adrien remembered details. Her favorite books. the fact she hated thunderstorms, the scar on her hand from burning herself at 14. He noticed everything. And slowly, against every warning in her mind, Clara fell in love with him. So completely that leaving him later nearly destroyed her. "Mama." Elias's weak voice pulled her back to the present. "We going home?" "Soon." She adjusted the blanket around him and stepped outside the clinic. Rain hammered the sidewalk. Cars splashed through flooded streets. Across the avenue, a giant digital billboard suddenly lit up with the image of Adrien Laurent speaking at a charity fundraiser. Clara froze. Even after 5 years, seeing him still hurt. The reporter beside him smiled brightly. Duke Laurent's foundation has pledged another $15 million toward housing recovery efforts after last year's financial crisis. People nearby stopped to watch. Some admired him. Others criticized billionaires, pretending to care about struggling families. But everyone knew his name. Adrien Laurent was impossible to ignore. Elias slowly lifted his head. His tired little eyes focused on the screen. Then he frowned. "That man looks like me." Clara's entire body went cold. A woman standing nearby glanced between the billboard and Elias. Then again, recognition flickered across her face. Not certainty, but enough to terrify Clara. She quickly turned away and pulled Elias closer. "Come on." Her heartbeat pounded violently as she hurried through the rain. Because she knew exactly what would happen if the truth reached Adrien. He would search for answers. And once Adrien Laurent started searching for something, he never stopped. Clara reached her apartment building just after sunset. The hallway smelled like damp walls and old smoke. Their tiny apartment sat on the 4th floor beside a broken window that never fully closed during winter. She laid Elias carefully on the couch before kneeling beside an old metal box hidden beneath loose floorboards. Inside were unpaid bills, a faded photograph, and one velvet ring case. Clara stared at it silently. 5 years ago, Adrien had opened that box beneath thousands of glowing lights on the manor balcony. "I love you," he told her. Then he asked her to marry him. She said yes. For 3 perfect weeks, Clara believed happiness might actually last. Then everything collapsed. The tabloids exposed their relationship first. Headlines mocked her background. Comment sections turned vicious. Women from elite families publicly called her manipulative. One article described her as a temporary fascination embarrassing the Laurent legacy. But the worst moment came later. Clara overheard Adrien's mother speaking to investors during a private dinner. "She will never survive this world," the older woman said coldly. "And if Adrien chooses her, the board will remove him within the year." Clara never forgot those words, because she saw the truth immediately. Loving her would cost Adrien everything. His company, his reputation, possibly his family's empire. Then, only days later, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Fear took over, not only for herself, for the baby. She grew up watching powerful families destroy ordinary people quietly, with lawsuits, threats, money, influence. And she knew children born into scandal often paid the cruelest price. So before Adrien could choose between love and duty, Clara made the decision herself. She disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, only silence. At first, she convinced herself it was temporary. But weeks became months. Months became years. And now Elias was sleeping beneath a thin blanket, while the heating pipes rattled loudly through their apartment. Clara wiped her eyes quickly before he could notice. Then suddenly, a hard knock struck the front door. She froze. Another knock followed. Slower this time. Heavier. Clara's stomach twisted. Nobody visited her, especially not at night. She carefully stepped toward the door. Another knock. Then a deep male voice from the hallway. "Miss Vale?" Her blood turned to ice, because she recognized the voice instantly. After 5 years. After endless nights trying to forget him. After running across an entire city to keep her child hidden. Duke Adrien Laurent had finally found her. Clara couldn't breathe. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too narrow, too hot. Another knock echoed through the apartment. "Miss Vale?" Adrien's voice was calmer this time, controlled. But Clara knew him well enough to hear what hid underneath it. Confusion, suspicion, and something dangerously close to hope. Her hands shook as she stared at the door. 5 years. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of exhaustion, fear, and sleepless nights. And somehow, despite changing cities twice, despite living quietly, despite avoiding every article and public event tied to the Laurent family, he found her. Behind her, Elias stirred beneath the blanket. "Mama," Clara rushed toward him immediately. "Baby, stay here, okay?" His cheeks were flushed from fever. Large gray eyes blinked slowly up at her. The same eyes Adrian had looked at her with the night he promised he would never let her face the world alone. The irony almost broke her. Another knock. This one firmer. Clara. The sound of her name and his voice shattered something inside her chest. No title. No distance. Just Clara. Like no time had passed at all. She closed her eyes briefly before unlocking the door. Adrian stood there, soaked from the rain. For one suspensed second, neither of them moved. He looked older. Not dramatically, but enough for pain to show in places success could not hide. The sharp confidence the world admired was still there. So was the expensive coat, the tailored black gloves, the impossible composure. But exhaustion lingered behind his eyes now. The kind, powerful men carried when nobody was watching. Clara's throat tightened, because part of her still loved him. And that was the most dangerous part of all. Adrian stared at her silently. Then finally, "You disappeared." No anger, no accusation. That somehow made it worse. Clara folded her arms tightly. "You shouldn't be here. I've spent 5 years trying to understand why you left." Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the cracked hallway floor. "I deserve at least one conversation." Clara almost laughed at the word deserve, because life had taught her something cruel over the years. Love and fairness rarely survived in the same room. "You need to leave," she whispered. Then Elias coughed behind her. Adrian's attention shifted instantly. Everything changed. His eyes moved past Clara, toward the little boy curled beneath the blanket, toward the child with his exact eyes. The entire hallway fell silent. Clara saw the realization happen slowly. First confusion, then disbelief, then something deeper, something raw enough to terrify her. Adrian stepped inside without speaking.
Imagine carrying a secret so heavy it changes every part of your life. Clara thought hiding her son would protect him. But sometimes the truth finds its way back, no matter how far you run. If this story is hitting your heart right now, like the video and stay with us, because the next moment changes everything.
Elias looked up weakly. "Mama." "Who's that?" Clara's pulse pounded violently. Adrian knelt carefully beside the couch. For the first time in years, Clara saw him speechless. He stared at Elias like the world had tilted beneath his feet. Children had never made Adrian emotional before. But this wasn't just any child. This was his son. "You're sick," Adrian said softly. Elias nodded slightly. "I got fever." The little boy studied him curiously. "You look like me." Adrian's jaw tightened. Clara looked away instantly, because watching that moment felt unbearably intimate. Painfully human, like witnessing two missing pieces suddenly recognize each other. Recent studies about absent fathers often describe something psychologists call instant attachment recognition. That immediate emotional shock some parents experience upon unexpectedly meeting their child. Clara once read about it during one of her sleepless nights. She never imagined she would watch it happen in real life. Adrian slowly stood. "How old is he?" Clara stayed silent. His eyes met hers. "How old?" 4. The answer hit him hard. She saw it immediately, because he understood the timeline, understood exactly when Elias had been conceived, understood she had carried his child alone, while the world believed she abandoned him without reason. Adrian stepped back slightly, like he needed room to think. "You were pregnant when you left." Clara crossed her arms tighter. "Yes, and you never told me. You had enough problems already." The words came out sharper than intended. Adrian stared at her in disbelief. "You think I would have abandoned you?" "No," Clara whispered. "I think your world would destroyed us." Silence filled the apartment. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Elias drifted back asleep, while tension thickened between them. Adrian walked slowly toward the tiny kitchen window. The apartment was impossible to ignore now that he stood inside it. Peeling paint, weak heating, water stains on the ceiling, the reality of how she had lived. His voice lowered. "You raised him here?" Clara felt shame crawl up her throat immediately. Not because she was embarrassed of Elias, never him. But because struggling in front of people who once knew you during better days always carried humiliation, especially people born powerful. You don't get to judge me. Adrian turned instantly. Judge you? His voice cracked for the first time. I'm trying to understand why the woman I loved vanished while carrying my child. Clara's composure finally broke. Because I was terrified. The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. Years of pressure, years of fear, years of carrying everything alone. You think rich families don't bury scandals? She continued. You think I didn't hear what your mother said about me? Adrian's expression changed immediately. She spoke to investors about removing you from the company if you married me. They called me a liability, a distraction. You should told me. And then what? Clara snapped. You would choose me and lose your empire? Or choose them and resent me forever? Adrian ran a hand through his wet hair. For the first time, Clara saw him struggling to hold himself together. Not the Duke, not the billionaire. Adrian looked toward Elias again. He has my eyes. Clara swallowed hard. Yes, he also smiles like you. The tenderness in his voice nearly destroyed her. Because for one dangerous second, she imagined what life could been. Family dinners, school mornings, normal problems, normal love. Instead, they stood inside a freezing apartment carrying 5 years of grief between them. Adrian moved closer carefully. Did you ever plan to tell me? Clara hesitated too long. That alone answered him. Pain crossed his face. You really intended to keep him from me forever. Tears burned behind her eyes. I was trying to protect him. From me? From your world. Adrian looked around the apartment again, then quietly asked, and this world was better. The question landed brutally because part of Clara asked herself the same thing every night. She remembered unpaid bills, skipped meals, panic attacks after Elias got sick, holding him while pretending everything would be okay. Survival had a way of exhausting even the strongest people. Then suddenly, a violent cough shook Elias awake. Clara rushed toward him instantly, but Adrian moved too. Their hands reached the child at the same time, and for one strange moment, instinct overpowered history. Elias clung weakly to Clara while Adrian touched the boy's forehead. His expression darkened immediately. He's burning up. He needs antibiotics. Did you get them? Clara said nothing. Adrian understood instantly. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed someone. Have Dr. Renfield sent here immediately, he said coldly. Then he glanced around the apartment. And send a driver. Clara stood quickly. No. Adrian looked at her. He's sick, Clara. We're fine. You are not fine. The silence afterward felt enormous. Because deep down, Clara knew he was right. Elias needed help she couldn't afford. And Adrian had enough power to solve the problem in minutes. That imbalance frightened her almost as much as loving him once did. A few moments later, Elias reached toward Adrian sleepily. You staying? The question visibly stunned him. Children had a way of cutting straight through emotional armor adults spent years building. Adrian crouched beside him slowly. If your mother allows it. Elias looked at Clara. She froze. Because suddenly the decision wasn't only hers anymore. That was the terrifying thing about secrets. Eventually, they stopped belonging to the person hiding them. Then Elias smiled weakly. And for the first time since entering the apartment, Adrian smiled back. The resemblance between them became impossible to ignore. Same eyes, same expression, same tiny crease near the corner of their mouths. Clara felt tears rise instantly, because the future she spent years running from had finally arrived, and she no longer knew how to stop it. Then suddenly, headlights flashed through the apartment window below. Adrian's driver had arrived, but another car stopped behind it. Long black vehicle, tinted windows, Launt family crest on the door. Clara's blood turned cold, because she recognized exactly who stepped out of the second car. Adrian's mother. And judging by the expression on her face as she looked up toward the apartment, she already knew about the child. Before we begin the final chapter, comment one thing you believe matters more than money. And if you've stayed with this story from the beginning, subscribe now. Because endings like this remind people what truly matters when everything else falls apart. Clara stopped breathing the moment she saw the Laurent family crest. Rain continued pouring outside the apartment windows while the black car idled beneath the street lamp below. Adrian's mother stepped out slowly, elegant as always. Perfect posture. Dark wool coat untouched by the weather because someone else held an umbrella over her head. Some people carried power loudly. Others carried it quietly enough to make entire rooms nervous. Vivienne Laurent belonged to the second kind. Clara felt years of fear return instantly, because no matter how much time passed, she still remembered the humiliation, the whispers, the articles, the cold smiles from wealthy women pretending kindness while tearing her apart behind closed doors. And now that same woman was walking toward her apartment building, toward Elias, toward the truth Clara spent 5 years hiding. Adrian noticed her panic immediately. She shouldn't be here. Clara laughed bitterly. You think? He stepped toward the window. I didn't call her. But she always finds out everything, doesn't she? The tension in the apartment thickened. Elias remained curled beneath the blanket while distant thunder shook the windows again. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Adrian quietly said something Clara never expected. She was wrong about you. Clara looked at him carefully. Adrian? No. Listen to me. His voice carried exhaustion now instead of authority. For years I convinced myself you left because you stopped loving me. Pain flickered across his face briefly. But you left because you were scared of what my world would do to you. Clara looked away, because hearing him finally understand hurt almost more than being misunderstood. Downstairs, the building entrance opened. Footsteps echoed faintly through the stairwell. Slow, measured, approaching. Clara's pulse spiked instantly. Meanwhile, another reality settled heavily inside Adrian. He had missed everything. The pregnancy, the birth, first words, first steps, birthday candles, nightmares, fevers. 4 entire years stolen by silence and fear. Psychologists often describe parental regret as one of the deepest emotional wounds adults experience later in life, especially among fathers separated from children during early development. Adrian felt every second of it now, and Clara could see it. A hard knock landed against the apartment door. Elias startled awake. Mama, it's okay, baby. But Clara's voice trembled badly enough to betray her. Another knock followed. Adrian moved first this time. When he opened the door, Vivienne Laurent stepped inside without waiting for permission. Her sharp eyes immediately scanned the apartment, the peeling walls, the tiny kitchen, the leaking ceiling. Then finally, the child on the couch. Everything about her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for Clara to realize the older woman saw it instantly too. The resemblance was undeniable. Gray eyes, dark hair. Adrian's exact expression staring back at her in miniature form. For the first time since Clara met her years ago, Vivienne Laurent looked completely unprepared. Elias blinked sleepily. Who's that? Nobody answered immediately. The silence stretched painfully. Then Vivienne slowly approached the couch. Not like a powerful aristocrat. Not like a woman entering beneath her status. Just slowly, carefully, as though one wrong movement might shatter something fragile. How old is he? She asked quietly. 4, Adrian answered. Vivienne's eyes closed briefly. 4 years. 4 years she never knew her grandson existed. Clara crossed her arms defensively. You've seen him, now leave. Adrian looked toward her instantly. But Vivienne surprised both of them. No. Clara frowned. No? The older woman turned toward her fully. And for the first time ever, there was no arrogance in her face. Only regret. I owe you an apology. The words landed so hard Clara genuinely thought she imagined them. People like Vivienne Laurent did not apologize. Especially not to women they once considered beneath them. Yet here she stood, older now, warier, looking directly at the consequences of her own cruelty. You warned Adrian away from me, Clara whispered. Vivienne swallowed carefully. Yes, you made me believe his entire family would destroy us. A painful silence followed. Then Vivienne said softly, because at the time, I probably would have. Adrian stared at his mother in disbelief. She continued before anyone could interrupt. I spent my entire life protecting this family's name. I confused control with love. Rain battered the windows harder outside. And by the time I realized that mistake, you were already gone. Clara didn't know what to say. Because hatred becomes complicated when the person who hurt you finally admits the truth. Elias slowly sat upright beneath the blanket, still pale, still tired, but watching everyone carefully now. Children always noticed emotional tension faster than adults realized. Vivian looked toward him again. Then something inside her visibly softened. "What's his name?" Elias, Clara answered quietly. The older woman nodded once. "Beautiful name." No one missed the tears forming in Adrian's eyes as he watched the interaction. Because despite everything, despite the damage, despite the years lost, this was still family. Broken, complicated, painful, but real. Suddenly, another cough shook Elias hard. Clara immediately knelt beside him. Adrian touched the child's forehead again. Still too hot. Moments later, hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway as Dr. Renfield finally arrived carrying a medical bag. Within minutes, the tiny apartment transformed into quiet chaos. Medicine prepared. Temperature checked. Instructions given carefully. The doctor eventually looked toward Adrian. He'll recover. But the fever could become dangerous if untreated much longer. Clara lowered her eyes immediately. Shame flooded through her again. But before she could speak, Adrian interrupted firmly. She did everything she could. The words hit Clara unexpectedly hard. Because survival often feels invisible until someone finally acknowledges how hard you fought just to keep going. After the doctor left, the apartment slowly became quiet again. Elias drifted asleep against Clara's shoulder, while Adrian sat nearby watching them both. Then softly, "You should come home." Clara looked up instantly. Home. The word terrified her. "You mean the manor?" "I mean somewhere you never have to struggle alone again." Vivian surprised Clara again by speaking quietly from the kitchen doorway. "He belongs with his father." Clara's chest tightened. "And if your world hurts him?" Vivian walked closer slowly. "Then this time, we protect him together." The sincerity in her voice felt almost impossible to process. Adrian stood carefully. "I know trust won't happen overnight." He looked toward Elias, sleeping peacefully now. "But I can't lose more time." Neither could Clara. That was the truth she could no longer outrun. Because keeping Adrian away from his son was no longer protection. It was fear. And fear had already stolen enough years from all of them. Clara looked down at Elias. At the little boy who deserved stability, warmth, security, family. Things she spent years trying to provide completely alone. Then she looked back at Adrian, the man she never truly stopped loving. The man standing inside a tiny apartment instead of running from scandal. The man whose eyes filled with tears every time he looked at their child. And suddenly Clara realized something devastating. The version of Adrian she feared no longer existed. People online often debate whether powerful men can truly change. Sometimes they cannot. But grief changes some people permanently. Love does too. Finally, Clara whispered, "I don't know how to do this anymore." Adrian stepped closer slowly. "You don't have to do it alone." The room fell silent again. Then Elias stirred sleepily between them. His tiny hand reached outward blindly until both Clara and Adrian instinctively grabbed it at the same time. And somehow that simple moment broke the final wall between them. No grand speech. No dramatic music. Just a child holding both his parents together after years apart. Vivian quietly wiped her eyes near the window, probably hoping nobody noticed. But Clara did notice, because pain had humbled all of them now. At last Adrian looked toward Clara carefully. "Come back with me, not as an order, not as a duke, just as a man asking for another chance." Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then finally, she nodded. Relief crashed across his face so powerfully it nearly broke her heart. Outside, the storm finally began to ease. Rain softened against the streets below. Morning light slowly appeared beyond the clouds for the first time all day. And for the first time in 5 years, Clara stopped running. Sometimes the deepest love stories aren't about perfect people. They're about broken people finding their way back to each other after life tears everything apart. If this story moved you, subscribe and comment your favorite moment below. And remember, some secrets destroy families, but some truths finally heal them.
Some love stories aren't about perfect endings. They're about broken people finally choosing each other again after years of pain. If this story touched you, Subscribe for more emotional stories that feel real, and comment below. Do you think Clara made the right choice by hiding the child?